Not so to say, sir, is the real thing. The next is UNISA, which is about 300 and 400,000. We are 600,000. So if I told the minister when he appointed me to be governing council chairman, that another 3 years, we're going to hit 1 million.
Thank you very much, sir. So we've taken note of that and we'll be discussing further with you on that. Yes, sir. From Kenya.
I'm Ben Ruhinda from East Africa, for Inter-University Council for East Africa. I do appreciate the presenter and also the authors. Good and well, I contributed on just the back end of supporting and framing some of the authors. And I do appreciate the concept of having it as a MOOCs. I do understand the challenge of meeting the timeline of the contract and having the tight timeline for the team to complete. But for the sustainability and continuity of this great idea, I think if we go forward, we can go for SCOM. SCOM meaning we can get the content, host it where now we are not constrained with the time and the resources of having it running. And we make it more open, where it will be self-paced, progress-based, and taking the Leo example of other systems, it's like any common MOOCs we talk about. We set the criteria for progress at every session. And the platform allows for the people to schedule the interaction. It will not stop them to interact, but it will not be prescribed in the dates and time. Having the challenge you have of the timeline on the global continent, where we are here in East Africa, it's 3 hours ahead, other parts it's more ahead or behind, we can offer to support using the skills we have. Actually, I'm an expert in that area. So we can make this system after the end of this contract to make it more flexible, open, and accessible. Because the word open, when you go on the website and states application is closed, immediately the word open dies and the trust of it goes down. So the registration have to be continuous. We schedule the response. We cap it with the total number of the people we want. We create the cohorts of the people who want to interact, and we put them in different cohorts. That even makes the interaction more better and more flexible. So on our side, as Inter-University Council, we can come in with expertise, but also in terms of resources and the service which is running, we have it. So we can be happy to continue this progress so that we don't lose the beauty we have currently. I look forward to be giving my support as I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that offer. Myself and Ramon will be looking forward to your mail to emphasize that and know how we'll go further. To also note that the copy you'll be receiving next week is an electronic copy of the book, not the physical copy. Indeed, we are not producing the hard copy. We have the electronic copy, which will be made available. And just as you said from IUCA, we want to make this course open as much as possible. And what we are doing now is a pilot, and we'll be able to report back to the European Union the outcome of that pilot and tell them what we want to do beyond where we are. And I hope that by the time we advance it into HAQAA2, we should be able to incorporate the suggestion of Professor Okebukola and to know that our interest is not just in regional integration alone. There are other subjects that should interest us as higher education people in Africa. And I hope it is in that context we'll be able to pick up other issues for our development. With this, we will round up this particular session. But before we do that, I think 6 weeks ago, I was in Paris to listen to the agenda of UNESCO for education in Africa. Permit me at this time to call on the director of UNESCO, African Union Commission, who is also UNESCO representative to Ethiopia, Dr. Rita Bissonaut, to come up and make a presentation on UNESCO program for education. You are welcome. You can. Oh. Yes. Can we get it on the screen? Can we do it fast? Anybody? Okay, or you want to do it from there? Yeah. Okay, give her the Zoom link and let her present it. Just connect to Zoom and present from there. So just present as a Zoom. Thank you very much. I think we'll say Huh? Good morning.
I wasn't able to say good morning.
Okay, good one, thank you. You've not seen the link? You can just do that first. Waiting, I learned that we have one or two online contributors who want to make something, who want to say something. Can we connect to that online person? And then Ramon, we also want to say something too. Can we connect to the online participants?
Yes. Yes. Also.
Yeah. Yes. Before Ramon, the online comments, can we connect to that person? There's an online participant who wants to say something. Okay, over to Ramon then. Ramon?
No, simply, very briefly, I wanted to react to some of the last interventions. Our friend, Professor Obebukola from Nigeria, and also Dr. Rahinda from the IUCA. I think that for the future, the success of our HAQAA2 initiative allows us to think or obliges us to think on training materials, on the materials and the MOOC series at different levels. There can be high-level training activities that at some point could even develop in a master's program that you are discussing in particular IUCA and the East African community, or to very short open courses as those by some American universities or provided by Coursera or Indian institutions for thousands and thousands of students. This is what we should think about for the future. The same topics at different levels of intensity and depth, caring for different needs and for different levels of participation. I think this is the main challenge for 2023 for discussion, and from 2023 onwards for implementation. But this is something that in first place, you and I or us in Obreal Global or Ursula should be discussing maybe at the beginning of next year.
Thank you very much. We talk more on this, and we hope that we will advance this in 2023. Thank you very much. So now over to Dr. Bissonaut, who will be making a presentation on UNESCO.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm so sorry for this delay. I hadn't sent it on the Zoom yet, so I do hope you can see. Right? So good morning. My name is Rita Bissonaut, and I head the UNESCO Liaison Office in Addis Ababa, which is the liaison office to the African Union, to the UN ECA, and representative to Ethiopia. So we're very happy to be here and would like to thank all the consortium, Obreal, AAU, my dear friend, Professor Olu, Dad, and who did I forget? Enkwa. So what I want to say is that the African higher education is at the heart of UNESCO's operational strategy for Priority Africa 2022-2029. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to stop. Sorry about this. Briefly, just what I'm going to talk about, the objectives of our operational strategy for Priority Africa, the challenges in Africa, our pillars of UNESCO's Priority Africa, and why and how we're linking higher education, Campus Africa, to what we're doing here today. Just very briefly, we know the population of our continent, 1.2 billion, and it has been estimated that this population will be doubled by 2050. We know that the expansion, the urbanization is really going on fast, as as we all know. And of course, this has a huge pressure on the existing infrastructure, roads, hospitals, schools, agriculture. I just want to remind you all that we have 17 UN sustainable goals. And of course, we have Agenda 2063, which is the AU agenda on the Africa we want. And these encompass, of course, all the aspects of economy, society, environment, especially at a time when we're talking a lot about climate change. I just want to underline that UNESCO has two priorities, Africa and gender equality. And in this line, UNESCO has developed what we call the operational strategy for Priority Africa 2022 to 2029. And this has been done in consultation with member states, UNESCO's Africa Group, which is the African group of ambassadors of Africa based in Paris, and of course the field officers and our UNESCO officers. to come up with this new operational strategy, we looked at what happened in the previous strategy of 2014 to 2021. And what this new strategy aims at is, of course, to achieve our 17 sustainable development goals and, of course, Agenda 2063 in our fields of competence. Our fields of competence in UNESCO are very large. We cover education, science, culture, communication and information, but which is not public information. I just want to highlight, and I will be coming to this in a little while. And the last one is social and human sciences, which encompasses the areas of youth, gender equality, sports, etc. So, we all know what is the Agenda 2063, an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens. And of course, for us to be able to achieve this Pan-African vision, we need to address those different challenges, which I talked about, in an innovative way. And I think I just want to say what we have done for this new strategy. We want to reflect UNESCO's commitment to accompany and support Africa towards the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063. And this strategy is a response to the diagnosis which has been formulated by African member states, as well as other key regional stakeholders, and here most especially the regional economic communities. And I know Professor Olu just talked about the regional entities. And I think REX, we should not forget, are the building blocks in our continent to make sure that we can implement the different programs ahead. And of course, as I said, this evaluation, this new strategy took note of the evaluation of the last strategy. What are the 5 major challenges? I just want to say demographic growth and sustainable development. In 2022, 60% of our population is under 27 years old. So imagine what is going to happen in the next 20 years, in the next 20 years to come. I just want to underline that by 2040, 40% of the African population will be the ones who will be the employees, who will be the ones at the forefront of the ones taking the job. So it is very important that as UNESCO, that as university professionals, as the different organizations that we are, we make sure that our youth, we need to harness the demographic dividend. And this is why education and knowledge sharing is so important at a time when sub-Saharan Africa faces the highest rates of education inclusion in the world. Climate change, we don't have to continue saying this. Africa is experiencing the unprecedented heat waves, natural disasters, extreme rainfall, major floods, depletion of its biodiversity, though no fault of Africa. I think this is very important. Africa is bearing the brunt of what is happening in other continents. We also have a challenge of our cultural renaissance, heritage, and history. And it is very important for me to underline here that Agenda 2063 also places cultural renaissance in the continent as one of its key priority to valorize cultural heritage. And of course, what is very important for us also is peace and democracy. And we know that when Agenda 2063 was launched, our African leaders committed to silencing the guns in the continent. So our strategy is based on fundamental principles, making sure that there is an administrative and functional system, partnerships, and this is why we're here today to be discussing with you, to be talking about you. Partnerships is key in the way going forward. We cannot work in silos, and I think this is something that we keep repeating. It is very important to work in a coordinated and synergized way. And I also want to quote about communicating. It is very also to be able to communicate effectively. And of course, we need a monitoring and evaluation process, without which we do not know where we're going and what we have achieved. What are the 5 flagship programs of this Priority Africa strategy? First one is Campus Africa, reinforcing higher education in Africa. And this is why, for us, it is so important as UNESCO to be here today, to be talking about the recognition of qualifications and diplomas. And Campus Africa, and one of the objectives of Campus Africa is the recognition of qualifications in the continent. So we are hoping to be able to continue working on HAQAA2 to make sure that we align our priorities together. Our second flagship project is General History of Africa. And I think this is so important. I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but the General History of Africa has existed for over 20 years. We have 11 volumes. You can go and check them online. They are very big volumes. But what we want to do as UNESCO is to make them learner-friendly, user-friendly, so that our children can learn about their history, which is written by Africans and for Africans. And I think this is so key. So what we're trying to do is to make little teaching and learning resources accessible to our children from learning from early childhood up to higher education. Of course, fostering cultural heritage and capacity development is our third flagship project. You all know UNESCO World Heritage Sites. We have over 2,000 World Heritage Sites, and I'm sure each of your country here has both tangible and intangible World Cultural Heritage Sites, and it is important to continue to conserve them and to preserve them. And this is our third flagship project. The fourth one is harnessing new and emerging technologies for sustainable development. And here UNESCO has developed an ethics of artificial intelligence at a time when we're all talking about AI, which has become very much a slogan. We forget very much about the effects of AI. For example, cyberbullying online, sexual harassment online. So I would advise you if you can go to our UNESCO website and check about this ethics of AI, which I think is such an important document, especially as you being educationists, to remind your students, your learners, challenges that you can face online. Our fifth flagship project is enhancing open science. Here, for example, developing OERs, reinforcing capacity building in basic and applied sciences and scientific research. It is very unfortunate to say that in the African continent, we do not have a lot of scientists, of top scientists who are publishing in peer-reviewed journals. We especially do not have a lot of women scientists, and I think this is something that we really need to work towards. And here we're working, of course, in ocean science, climate change, resilience, and water resource management, which is so important. I'm right now based in Ethiopia, and Ethiopia is facing right now droughts in some areas and in other areas and floods. And from the different regions where you are, we all know that water management is such a crucial issue. I was just talking about the universities. We come back to Campus Africa. Less than 10% of worldwide student enrollments in Africa and universities in 2017. So this shows that we really have a long way to go. And I just want to add something here that because we're talking of gender equality, we only have one girl out of 5 in the African continent who finishes her secondary education. So out of those, imagine how many will go to higher education and not only access higher education, but complete at least a first degree. We are going in very minute numbers. Talking about African scientific production, which was what I was just talking earlier, is less than 1% of the world's research. So, of course, as university professors, as university leaders, let us make sure that we have more increased networking, increase our research capacities and peer learning among higher education institutions, increase learning pathways and access to higher education through strengthened mobility, inter-university cooperation and recognition mechanisms. This is why we're all here today, and we hope to move this agenda. But I think most importantly, make sure that our youth are able to insert the labor market and try to see how we can address this skills mismatch, especially that we have in the TVET systems with the labor markets. So it is so key to connect higher education systems, institutions, researchers, and communities to unlock not only individual, but national and regional potentials. Campus Africa, just briefly, a little glance, what it is all about: enhance the research capacity of African research institutions with research outcomes and effective networking, improve the availability of quality data. And I know that this is the next part of the session, that we'll be talking about data in higher education, of course, to inform evidence-based decision-making. I'm going to repeat this again, but I think this is so important. Promote recognition of qualifications backed by mutual recognized quality assurance mechanisms. This is what we have been talking about here for the past 2 days. But I think most importantly, also increase access to higher education, TVET, for all our Africans by promoting equal opportunities for learners from all backgrounds. And here we know we're talking about inclusivity, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized groups. And something that is very key and very important to UNESCO is to talk about greening higher education. And at a time we're talking about greening TVET, greening higher education, let us not forget this aspect at a time that we're talking about climate change. I mean, COP15 has just finished on biodiversity in Montreal. COP27 just finished two, 3 weeks ago in Egypt. So let us not forget this aspect of greening our education. And the last one here is mainstreaming online learning and teaching, making use of AI, big data, and advanced technologies. What is the focus on Campus Africa? Just the main components quickly is to assist Sub-Saharan Africa countries to develop the robust network of higher education clusters in national universities with a strong research focus. But something that we really want to focus on is strengthen postgraduate TVET systems, continue the deployment of UNESCO Passport of Qualifications, and create a digital platform of Campus Africa, creating and decimating more our research, our data. So the key outputs is, as I just said, to have research-intensive clusters, networking of universities, establishments of national QAs, and recognition. I think this is something that we tend to forget, is refugees. At a time, as I said, we're talking of inclusivity, we're talking of vulnerable group, but we're talking about refugees. And this is so key at a time in many of our countries which are facing conflict or post-conflict, where we have a lot of displaced people. What do we do? What should we do about the qualifications of our displaced people, of the refugees, especially in higher education, especially in TVET? And this is where we need to talk more about the support for the recognition of the Addis Convention, but not only the Addis Convention, but the UNESCO's Global Convention of Recognition of Qualifications in Higher Education. And the last one is strengthening postgraduate TVET systems. So what is the impact of higher education systems and institutions in Africa? Of course, it's to advance socioeconomic development. I'm just not going to repeat again, but again, increased networking, strengthen mobility, inter-university cooperation, recognition of mechanisms that bridge both formal and non-formal and informal learning pathways. But as I said again, also social and economic inclusion of our youth by reducing the skills gap. So of course, we have direct beneficiaries, indirect beneficiaries, the direct ones, of course, the ministries in charge of higher education, and the indirect ones, of course, the learners. Something that maybe that I just wanted to add, which I think I cannot see in my slide, is that we have had, only on Monday, we learned that we have had 20 countries who have finally ratified the UNESCO Global Qualification, the Convention of Global Qualification, Recognition of Qualification, and this shows, and this we are very happy, I think with the last one being Ireland, under your correction, Dr. Abdullahi, and this means that we can now go ahead with advancing, with making sure that now it is going to be domesticated at national level. So this is a very, very important milestone for us at UNESCO that we have recognized. We have now 20 countries which have recognized UNESCO's global recognition of qualifications. So with this, I thank you very much for listening to me.
Again, appreciate Dr. Rita Bisson-Naut for that presentation on UNESCO. And also permit me to thank Dr. Abdullahi Salifu for inviting AAU to the launch of Campus Africa in Paris some weeks ago, and to note that the plan is to involve all the regional networks in Africa in the Campus Africa program. This session was not included in the original program. I know we are eating up into another program. So please just take this session as one of information and to just go directly to the next session. I will now call on the chair of this next session in the person of Professor Peter Okebukola to introduce the next session. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, highly distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's so gladdening that the program for today is like moving from all the different projects, and they're coming to a project that has to do with books. If you notice, the theme for this morning session is on policy impacts on harmonization. And here we are in the morning or earlier, we looked at the policy impact relating to the MOOCs implementation. Now, we are going to be looking at the academic contribution to CISA. The way I suggest we go is this. We are provisioned 30 minutes for this session. Let me assure you that we are not going to go 1 second beyond the 30 minutes. I negotiated, if we're quality assurance people, my assumption is that we should show by example. So if we say that the session is going to start at 9 sharp, it starts. If it's going to end at 10 sharp, it ends. The story about, this is very important, we must say it, will not happen, with regard to me. Now, I asked our presenter about how long it would take him, and he said he needs 25 minutes. I said, no, you don't need 25 minutes. You need to tell us in 20 minutes, because I need 10 minutes for us to interact with what you are going to be providing us. And please just give me 1 second. My duty now to just introduce the presenter. You know, in the original program, we have him as chair and presenter. And he told me that the 2 caps will be too heavy on his head, that he needs to just wear the cap of the presenter, and that maybe he can give me the cap to be chair. And so I need your cap now to actually physically wear it so that I can chair this session. Damto Tefera, who is going to be making a presentation on HAQAA2's academic contribution to CESA, is the Director of Research and Programs of AAU. He is a professor of higher education and founding director of the International Network for Higher Education in Africa at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Durban. He's a convener and founder of the Higher Education Forum for Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and is founding editor-in-chief of the accredited journal, International Journal of African Higher Education. He chairs the Ethiopian Ministry of Education's Advisory Council, and earlier the Ministry of Science and Higher Education. He has published more than over 100 peer-reviewed articles, book chapters, and other think pieces, and 10 books, including Scientific Communication in African Universities, External Assistance and National Needs by Routledge 2003, African Education and International Reference Handbook, Indiana University Press, and founding Higher Education in Sub-Saharan Africa by Palgrave Macmillan. The last two are award-winning. I've spent about 1.5 minutes introducing him. I'm going to deduct that from his 20 minutes. One thing I noticed, though, is this. When we attend conferences, you find that a good proportion of the people are busy on their laptops, on their phones, and just managing to share their sense organs with, the thing. But what I found here is that just a small fraction of us are busy with our laptops, busy with our phones. What does that tell me? The conclusion I draw from that is that you are wonderful people, paying attention, not being distracted. So for the next 18 minutes, don't be distracted. Just listen to Damto as he makes his presentation. Damto, you have the floor.
Very much, colleagues, friends, and my chair. I say to him, please chair my session. Already he's giving me a warning, in terms of how much time I have to speak. So that as a background, this is the CISA African Higher Education book series. I thought that I provide some historical context to this work. In 2015, the African Union Commission sought to develop a continental, a strategy for Africa for 10 years. So they picked 5 Africans from Africa and the diaspora to develop this strategy document. I was humbled to be brought into this exercise, and finally we developed this document called the Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2016-25, or affectionately called CISA 2016-2025. So subsequent to that, the Commission established a number of clusters. And a number of clusters, at least a dozen of them, one of which included the higher education cluster. And once again, I was humbled to co-coordinate the CISA higher education cluster. So I just want to give you this background before I actually talk to you in terms of the task and in terms of what has been taking place. So the CISA African Higher Education book series is a strategic intervention, ultimately to advance higher education in Africa in keeping within the framework of the CISA higher education cluster. So what is the conceptual framework that actually guides this work? In brief, that is a picture you have right there on the screen, that at the center of it is a knowledge. So run it from you. Oh, backwards. But I was out. I was off and I'm back. Okay, now I have to share it. Are we good?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So you may probably need to run it from there if I think. Do you have it there? Just run it from there. You can't see this screen? I don't know. Oh, it's not moving. Okay. Can you run it, Enoch? Okay, great. So I'll then continue to say next slide. Go to the next slide, please. Yes. So this is actually what is the knowledge production aspect of it, the knowledge dissemination aspect of it, sitting at the heart of what is happening in terms of the policy, in terms of the training, and in terms of also the next generation, some of the conversations we've had. So this is what is driving the exercise of the book series. Next slide. Then, subsequent to subsequent to the establishing the cluster, the team sat down and then formed multiple subclusters, about 13 of them, including harmonization, quality assurance and accreditation, gender, research and graduate education, student affairs, private higher education, open distance and online education, public-private partnerships and entrepreneurship. Next slide. ICT libraries, curriculum teaching and learning, internationalization and diaspora mobilization, scholarly publishing and knowledge dissemination, leadership and management, and the professionalization of the academia. So these are the subclusters under the cluster of higher education. So next slide. What is really the objective of the series? It is actually intended to produce evidence-based knowledge in the areas, the thematic areas of the higher education cluster, the one I just mentioned. But the keyword there is a rigorous process. That rigorous process means a very rigorous process means, as academics, we have to do quite a lot of intense peer review and so forth. So this actually, ultimately, the implication is on the policy, on the discourse, African higher education discourse, and the actions from the continental perspectives as guided by 2063. So the intention, as I also indicated earlier, contributes to the conversations in building the next generation of scholars, academics, researchers, policymakers. Next slide. Just to provide you how we operate, the higher education series publishes thematic issues. And this, each team is led by coordinators and editors who work closely with the series editor and overall co-coordinator. The series editor and the overall coordinator, who happens to be me, executes this role on behalf of the African Union Commission within the framework of the CISA higher education cluster. So the following 5 themes have been identified to start the series. The word here is to start the series. What are the 5 identified series materials? These are 5 books which we are anticipating to produce. The first one is on harmonization, quality assurance and accreditation. 2, research and graduate education. 3, private higher education. 4, curriculum teaching and learning. And 5, scholarly publishing and knowledge dissemination. In the next slide, I would like to share with you what would be the content of each book. So initially, when we started this exercise, we thought of simply including 8 chapters in each book. And largely, it would be single-authored material. But apparently, subsequent to multiple conversations and given the thematic areas in which we are covering, that strategy had to be revised, as I share with you the slides. So the next slide would, yes, this is harmonization, quality assurance, and accreditation. This is coordinated by or edited by none other than Professor Juma Shabani and Professor Peter Okebukola, what I call the godfathers of quality assurance in Africa. So in this book, we have multiple contributors from Burundi, for example, the first chapter. I'm not going to go through the list, simply to indicate the kind of topics we will be covering. As you actually quickly realize, the conversations we've had here, we have been trying to capture it in an intellectual engagement. So just to share with you in terms of the topics here, we are looking at harmonizing higher education, and we are looking at recognizing qualifications and qualification frameworks in Africa. We look at also within the context of harmonization, policy and practical underpinnings of harmonization. We look at fundamentals of quality assurance in higher education. We also have exemplary practices in higher education, etc. So as you can actually see, the contributions come from multiple countries. Some of the chapters are jointly from people who have come from different parts of the continent. That was a deliberate approach on our part, also need-based. If you, the next slide, please. It goes on to show that we have people from other parts of the world, from Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Ghana, Nigeria. We have tried to make sure that the language divide or the regional divides would not be an issue for the book. And we tried our best to make sure that there is sufficient representation of contributions from multiple countries. Next slide. Let me share with you the private higher education. I am very happy to report this one, and you might also wonder why I have the names there, because this is a book which is almost ready to go to the publishers, and because the work has already been vetted and reviewed and even edited. So that's why you actually see the names right there. So we have contributions from Ethiopia, Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, next slide, Nigeria, South Africa, Tunisia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Some of these names I'm sure you recognize. And I also am aware there are at least one or two contributors to the book here to actually now realize that this is the product of the work you have been undertaking. So the next slide is curriculum, teaching, and learning. This is Proscovian Namubiru from Uganda, Charmaine from Namibia, and myself, of course. So as you can actually see, we have also tried to make sure that we cover this broad topic by making sure that we deployed multiple contributors from many countries. One example you can see under 4 is that we have multiple contributors from South Africa, Nigeria, Zambia, Kenya, and so forth. That tells you that when you actually, I'm sure if a number of you have written co-written materials, and you can appreciate the kind of challenges that exist in co-writing or co-creating materials. The next one is just a further provision of the curriculum and teaching. The topics are there. I'm not gonna read them to you, except that it will be boring, but I will give you a second to just give you the glimpse because I don't want to run against the time that was clearly stated. The next one is a continuity. So as I said to you earlier, the initial plan was 8 chapters, but we are actually pushing. Some of them go even up to 12, 13 chapters. The next one is on scholarly publishing and knowledge production by Professor Ibrahim Oanda. But I'd probably share some of the materials here as we are trying to cover this broad area. The first chapter, which would be written by Professor Oanda and myself, will look at contextualizing scholarly publishing and knowledge production in Africa, the politics of knowledge production in Africa, the continental landscape of scholarly publishing, university presses in Africa, international scholarly publishers on the continent, economics of scholarly publishing, and next slide, knowledge dissemination, the current language landscape of publishing and indigenous languages, e-publishing, open access, we talked a lot about, and the future of publishing in the continent. We'll be looking at ethical issues in scholarly publishing and so forth. The next slide is a task which we Professor Oyewole and myself are pursuing. So under this particular thematic area of this book, we are looking at building research collaboration. What does it mean? What's the implication and so forth? Research financing and funding. We look at governance and leadership in research, role of ICT in advancing research, the role of diaspora in research development. Next slide. Centers of excellence for research development, industry-university collaboration, open science, research management, research excellence, and conclusion. This is the plan. I'm given 5 minutes. I still have a lot of time, so let me reflect a bit. The exercise, as you can imagine, I'm sure, how many of you are editors of a book or have served as a journal editor or sit in the board of a journal? Can you a show of hands? Okay, a show of hands. Okay, so you appreciate the kind of work we do here. We solicited work. We actually had to reject a couple of them and then find other authors to replace it. So we made sure that the work is a very rigorous work, which we will be proud of as contributors, as authors, and also editors of the book. We have been delayed exactly for the reason I mentioned here. We had to change coordinators. We had to reject some work that came in, even after several iterations. And I want you to appreciate the kind of work we have been doing. But ultimately, we look forward for this first phase of the book series to be completed soon. I still have some minutes, but I will submit to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Professor Damto.
Next slide.
We are so delighted. We're happy in Africa that we have someone like you who is committed to high-level scholarship and is deploying his knowledge, his skills in attending to this very important project. The floor is now open. If you have some questions or comments, observations, we'll be happy to take them. Yes, sir, from Kenya, Quality Assurance Director, University of Nairobi.
Thank you, Prof. We were in university together 2018. I hope you remember, Professor Peter. First of all, let me thank the presenter, Professor Damto, for such a wonderful work. I think all the 5 areas, coming from my university, I find them very, very good, very, very interesting. Probably I'll add, if you have something on emerging issues because of education emergencies, especially the use of e-learning, courseware development, teaching and learning using the modern technologies. If it was covered, then maybe because you summarized your work. From what we read is such that it is a book series, and you have said that probably one will be ready soon. I hope universities will be able to access them. And then number 2, now that HAQAA2 is coming to an end, is this now going to be HAQAA3 to continue with it? Because it looks like we are still a bit far from having this book series to be used by the different stakeholders, including universities. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, sir. Yes, ma'am, I will take Professor Lenga next. Let me tell you the order now. Yes, ma'am. Can you introduce yourself? No, don't speak yet. Just introduce yourself. Let me know who.
Yeah, I'm Beatrice Odera.
Can you speak louder, ma'am?
I'm Beatrice Odera Kwach.
Okay, that's fine, Madam Beatrice. That's fine. Then Madam Lenga. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Madam Maria. So we take those 3, and then we'll ask our erudite professor here to respond, and then we'll take some more. recalling that by 11:45 noon, we've got to stop. Yes, Madam Beatrice, Professor Beatrice. Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for that presentation. For the scholarly work being done, this is an area where there's a gap and quality assurance. I'm an expert in information knowledge management, so I collect a lot of information on higher education. But I've been trying to scroll. At times when you're working on these electronic gadgets, we also look for the relevant information related to what we are undergoing. I've seen the strategy, but I see what I've heard now from Professor is a work in progress. And but when the publication is out, you should think of open access. I don't know where it will be available so that we can create the links on our websites for our communities to access. So that was missing, like when you publish, but think of open access is the more cheaper option nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Professor Lenga.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Professor Tefera, for the presentation. I did hear that one of the book series is almost ready, and I was just hoping that we'd get a timeline so that we know when to expect that one. And at the same time, I don't know whether I would be asking too much. If the other 4, because I thought there were 5, the other 4 series, we could get the stages of development, how far and when it's likely that we can expect them, whether through the open access, online or whatever. Thank you.
Great
Chair.
question, great observation. Yes, Professor Maria from Angola.
Muito obrigada. Ouvi com atenção o que foi dito e aproveito a oportunidade para felicitar. Estamos realmente ansiosos, esperando pela data ou pela publicação, mas, entretanto, eu tenho algumas questões. Falou num plano e deixou uma questão, não respondeu essa questão. Qual é o plano? Diz que há esse plano, essa questão não foi respondida, não sabemos exatamente quando vai ser publicado, sabemos que é a primeira série e que virão outras. Falou em colaboração, mas essa colaboração, até nesta publicação, a quem deve incluir? Aqui há uma série de académicos. Eles terão a oportunidade de contribuir ou de participar nessas séries, de escrever, sim ou não? E se sim, como é que isso vai acontecer? Que oportunidade é que está sendo dada? Eu não sei muito bem, posso estar um bocadinho alheia a tudo isso, mas eu gostava de ter alguma informação, porque muitas vezes a publicação, todos aqui, os académicos sabem, que pelo menos a nível da África, para os nossos países, é difícil publicar, não por falta de material, mas muitas vezes é porque a investigação não é prioridade para os governos. Não temos um financiamento sustentável, não temos uma prioridade definida e publicar, a maior parte das vezes fica para trás.
Please summarize quickly.
Okay,
Please.
So that's why... Sorry. Por essa razão, eu gostava de saber que estratégia de colaboração e de publicação é que está no seu plano. Obrigada.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. So, can you respond very quickly, sir?
Me?
Yes. To the 4.
Okay, thank you. I'm still on. Yes. Largely, the questions were looking at in terms of dissemination. I think a number of you raised that issue. Whether it should be whether this would be an open access. That's a negotiation that has to happen between the respective publishers. Okay. Some publishers would allow you to have open access if payments are made to the publishers. That the dynamics of publishing. Anyhow, it's even within the open access, it's a very complex reality there. The other question was date of publication. I'm hoping that it will be published very soon. I've hoped that this would happen months ago, but my hope is this will happen in the next months. That's what I can say. I can't. In fact, at this stage, I want to put on the spot the coordinator himself here and the other coordinator right there, Professor Oyewole, on the spot, because they are the contributors, not only contributors actually, the co-ordinators of the book. But the point here is we're doing the best we can to make sure that this material is produced as soon as possible. In fact, there is one of the contributors here is here. I saw the name. When was this? When we met? And then I was wondering if he's one of those people whose work we have rejected, but apparently it was one of the good chapters, I must say. So this is just by way of a comment. I don't know. I've left my contacts here. If some of you are interested in the engagements in the future, I'm happy to engage with.
We'll be able to take only one, and that's from two. Please make it very brief. No long stories. Professor Isalifo and my co-chair, Professor Anna. Yes, sir. Make it very brief.
Okay, thank you very much. I will speed. I want to thank first Professor for his presentation. It is, let's say, a kind of information sharing. As you know, since the CESAR starts and SDG4, UNESCO is working to monitor the progress made. And you know that IIP is our institute specialized in education planning, and they are working closely also with Institute of Statistics of UNESCO. We thank God that the first monitoring report has been presented, let's say early October 2022 at the margin of ADA conference. So I think that we need to focus also on the monitoring and process of higher education for CESAR agenda. So we are working on it, and we can share the report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for making it very brief. I trust that Professor Ana Maria Napule will also make it brief. Back to you, ma'am.
Muito obrigada. Eu vou falar em português, porque a preocupação que eu quero colocar, ela está relacionada com o desafio de o continente ser um contexto multilingue. E há muitas contribuições que estão a ser feitas na produção de conhecimento estão a ser feitas em língua inglesa para depois serem traduzidas para outras línguas. Significa que algo relativo ao conhecimento produzido nas outras línguas, como é o caso do português, vai ficar fora desta produção de conhecimento. Como é que nós poderemos, nos próximos programas, incluir produção de conhecimento nas outras línguas que não seja o inglês? Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Back to you, sir, Professor Damtu. Yeah,
thank you, Anna, for that comment. I very much hoped hopefully when we are on HAQAA2, some of these books would be translated into multiple languages. I'm hoping that will happen. So, because this is going to be an extensive outcome of this initiative, which actually warrants the translation of the book. Thank you, Salifu, for that comment. I don't have further to say, however, except to say that I'll get in touch with you.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry we can't take any more. I like how Professor Salifu said it, that this session is information sharing. our scholar here, our erudite professor, Professor Damtu Tefera, has shared information about the CESA book series. And we are I have all the tongues of everybody in this room rolled into mine to thank you for what you are doing. I thought we want to appreciate him for the work done so far, and we look forward to unveiling the first one and the rest in the series. When somebody tells me that I have only 5 minutes to make a presentation, I don't argue with the person. Don't argue. Because you know why? Just present in 5 minutes, and you know that there will be question and answer session. So do the question and answer session, then you can then be taking all the things that you couldn't fit into the 5-minute slot. The other that I, as emergency chairman of this session, is emergency because I was not listed to be chair. Emergency chair, I will not do what many friends of mine, some friends of mine do when they chair meetings. And that's not to say that that practice is bad, but that's to say that that is my idiosyncratic way, my own way of doing it. They will then tell you at the end of it, Professor Damtu Tefera, in his address, told you this. Begin to summarize. And the time they are summarizing is almost like twice the time that the presenter mentioned it. You know what I think? You are insulting me as a participant. When we were at the University of Ibadan, in our zoology class in 1970, we used to do this animal behavior experiment where we find out how long it would take a cockroach to forget something that you have just asked it to do. It takes the cockroach, Periplaneta americana species, just 1 hour, it will forget. So if I were sitting there and I just heard Professor Tefera delivering his lecture, and then you as chairman, you are now spending another time. You are telling me they have a cockroach brain, that I cannot remember what he had just said. So I'm not going to insult you by now saying that he said this, and this. All I want to say is that it is time for coffee. Go and enjoy your coffee and come back here in 20 minutes when we'll take on a roadmap for enhanced data collection in Africa. I promise you it's going to be an exciting session. Have a nice time at the coffee